pain-free wishes, and welcome to my vlog, People in Pain. What does People in Pain vlog got to do with servicing brakes and changing oil and putting winter tires on? Absolutely nothing. But this is my channel, People in Pain vlog, and I do some reviews videos, and I also do some how-to videos, like basic car maintenance and tips and whatnot. Behind me I have a 2000 Chevrolet Malibu. This one's actually the Platinum Edition, which gives you the 3.6 variable valve timing motor, V6. So what we're going to be doing today in the shop is installing these four snow tires. I got these used online, but they're almost like new, and I refinished the rims because they were rusty and had them painted. So what we're also going to do today is change the oil. I use Mobile One, and no, they don't pay me for saying that. And I use a Mobile One filter as well. So what we're going to do is go through why we service the brakes and how to service the brakes, and I'll be installing the snows and changing the oil. I've already done an oil change video, so I probably will skip some of that. But I will show you how to service brakes at home. And first let me explain to you why to service the brakes and what you're paying for if you actually take it somewhere for service and they recommend a brake service. A lot of people will say that. So the reason to service your brakes is so that they will work at optimum. If you do not service your brakes and just want to wear them out until you replace them, yes, you will not have to pay for brake services. However, your brakes will not perform at 100% level, no matter whatever the actual pad, rotor, brake shoe, or drum thickness is. You want to maximize your brakes for safety. And that's why when I used to work in service, I would recommend getting brake serviced. You know, I had a customer once say, well, if I pay X number of dollars to have my brake serviced over the course of the brakes, I can just buy new brake pads and rotors or whatever down the road. But yeah, you'll be replacing them a lot sooner, a lot faster, and you'll also be not having proper brakes. Now, if it comes to driving down the street and an animal or a person jumps out in front of you while they're not looking, you want your brakes to be working at optimal performance, and that's why we service the brakes. It also gives the technician or yourself an excellent chance to look at the life of your brakes, where you stand, not only from longevity point, but how much the actual pad thickness is, how the rotors are, and give you an idea when you will be requiring either your next brake service or brake replacement. There's a lot of more components to brakes just than pads and rotors. There are calipers, caliper sliders. Also, people that get that annoying brake squeal can help be eliminated by servicing your brakes, as well as checking out the braking system, making sure that there's no leaks in the hydraulic lines or the steel lines, and you just want to make sure that your vehicle is safe for your family and yourself and the other people on the road. So that's why I highly recommend getting your brake serviced, whether you do it yourself or you pay a technician. I've seen brake services go from anywhere from 50 bucks for the front or the back, as high as 99 bucks. But you are paying for a service that should be done on a regular basis to your car. Personally, myself, I over-maintain my car, so I service my brakes twice a year when I do my summer-winter tires. Sometimes they don't need it servicing that much. I know the dealers, I think they recommend every 20,000 kilometers. I could be wrong. You'll have to check your owner's manual for what the recommended service interval for servicing your brakes is. It's not mandatory, but it will save you money in the long run. And also, like I said, it gives you an opportunity to check where you're at, a baseline where you are with your brakes in your vehicle, and also it gives you a chance to save some money for future repairs. By servicing your brakes, you can prevent from a brake seizing up on one side. So if you hit the brakes and the car wants to pull a certain way when you're driving, that could indicate either a caliper is seized up, the piston inside, or the sliders are not sliding back and forth properly, they're not lubricated, and that can cause a premature brake failure, and also one side to wear faster than the other, and also a safety issue. So really, I see a value for your dollar in doing it yourself or paying a technician to do it. Probably the total cost to service your brakes in material is around maybe 20 bucks, and you can reuse a lot of the material that you have over several brake services. It's not like all at once, but you will need your standard tools like a jack, safety stands, safety glasses, an air compressor, and your tools, which I will show you later to service your brakes. And I will be doing a step-by-step process on how to service your brakes. And you know, it also gives you a chance to check your tire wear as well, and see if things are running evenly, if you need alignment. So it's a really good opportunity to service your vehicle. It's something I truly believe in. I'll give you an example. My dad's car, it's a 2006 HHR. He bought the car brand new. I've been servicing the brakes since the vehicle was new, and at 108,000 kilometers, which is just over 60,000 miles, he had to replace the pads for the first time, and we did the rear shoes at around 110,000 kilometers, so that's pretty good maintenance. Now, mind you, he got it done for free by me, and you know, I may have charged him $5 for a can of brake cleaner, right, or some lube or something, but really, in hindsight, he did get a long life out of it. However, there are different factors that will cause your brakes to prematurely wear out. A, lack of service. B, one of the main factors, excuse the noise, garbage guy, is different drivers. Different drivers in a household will have different driving habits. You may have somebody in your household, and I'm not insinuating, but somebody that likes to ride their brakes and two-foot it when they're driving, which is very, very bad for the vehicle. Also hammering your brakes at a traffic light. So if you come up to a traffic light and you wail on the brakes, now sometimes it's unavoidable due to, you know, like I said, a person walking out, a dog or something. You can't help but avoid just slamming on your brakes. But what happens is a brake pad will heat up, and as you're applying the brakes and you come to a complete stop, that pad is super hot and it creates a hot spot in the rotor, which eventually warps the rotor. So if I by chance have to hammer on the brakes for whatever reason, I like to usually roll up a couple inches after I've stopped. That way the hot part of the pad is not on the same part of the rotor, which will have a tendency to heat up that rotor and then cause the rotor to warp, which then could cause either replacement of the rotor, or it could cause you to get your rotors resurfaced on a brake lathe, which can be expensive. I know I just had my Camaro rotors turned, and they cost me $35 a rotor to get turned. However, it was cheaper than replacing a rotor for $125 each. So, and I also serviced them while I had the rotors turned, and I eliminated the brake pulsation. One way to check for brake pulsation is if you're driving your vehicle and you apply the brakes and you feel a shake in the steering wheel as you're applying the brakes. That will most likely be the front brakes that are causing the shake. If you apply the brakes and you feel a shake in your bum or the brake pedal, like the back of the car is kind of shaking, that will be coming from the rear of the vehicle. If it does both, chances are that all the drums, or if it's a four-wheel disc, will need resurfacing or replacing depending on how bad they are. If you take it to a shop, they will measure the thickness of the rotor and the brake drum to ensure that it is able to go in a brake lathe and actually resurface that material properly to a true flat surface. Now, moving forward, if you have a vehicle and you plan on keeping your vehicle, servicing your vehicle on a regular basis, again, I highly recommend servicing your brakes. Again, whether you do it yourself or you take it to your local mechanic. Finding a local mechanic you can trust is key. So we will get started with working on the vehicle today. First thing we're going to do is get our tools and safety stands and brakes and put on our safety glasses. Remember, you only get one set of eyes. You may get another set of fake teeth, but you can't replace your eyes. So I highly recommend some safety goggles. And also, if your vehicle has a lock-in wheel nut key, find that first, because that can definitely be frustrating when servicing your vehicle. Okay, so if you're servicing your vehicle at home, I write down when I changed the oil last, what oil and filter I used, the actual date, the mileage then, and when I recommend it to be due, because I don't have those little stickers I put on the windshield, but it's recommended November the 15th, which is like middle of next week, and it's recommended at 157,000 kilometers, and my car right now says 153. So I'm doing it like a week early, but the mileage is a little bit early. The reason I'm doing it now is because we're supposed to get some inclement weather, and I don't want my Camaro outside in the snow. So I figured it's a nice day, get it done a week early, no big deal. Here's the tools that we're going to need today: impact gun, lock and wheel nut, torque wrench. I also use a torque bar, large channel locks, flathead screwdriver, wire wheel, sanding 1/4-inch driver with some sanding discs, brake lube, disc brake quiet, brake cleaner, oil and filter, and some washer fluid. And let's get started. The first thing you want to do is, if you don't have a flat surface in the garage, or as this one is, you're going to want to put a wheel chuck under the back to ensure that the vehicle doesn't roll. My garage is flat, so we're going to jack it up and get some safety stands under it. What I like to do after I've got a car all jacked up is I like to give it a shake, because if this car is going to fall off the stands, it's going to fall on the floor, maybe do some damage to the car, but at least I'll be alive. And safety is of crucial importance. So let's go around and give her a good shake. If you feel comfortable with it, then you can safely work under it. To be honest with you, I don't like where this jack stand is sitting, so I'm actually going to jack it back up and move it over. But this one is good. Okay, so for the oil change, we'll need our oil filter wrench, a 13 mil for this particular car, and a drain can. You want to dispose of your oil environmentally and take it to a place that recycles oil. Basically, where I live in Ontario, anywhere that sells oil has to take it back. So you could drop it off at your local lube shop or retailer that sells oil. Now the oil filter is up there, so I'll just use the oil filter wrench and get that off, and then we can drain the oil. I like to drain the oil as I'm servicing the brakes. That way it drips completely empty as it can be. Now, the oil will drip down, so you're going to need the rags to wipe it up. And And then I'll let that drain, and once it's drained out, I'll clean up all the oil here, wipe everything down and off the floor. Okay, now we're gonna drain the oil. Slide the Now, sometimes when you change oil, the drain plug, the threads will become worn, or the gasket here, this one's a rubber gasket, it's actually part of the actual drain pan bolt, can be worn out. So you want to change these ever so often. I don't know, every second or third is what I do. But I replaced this drain plug the last time I changed the oil, so I'm not necessarily concerned about this drain plug, but you don't ever want to cross thread this or have to put in a Healy coil. They're a pain to do, so it's just best that you replace the plug every third or fourth time, or just inspect it as you go. I'm using a Mobile One filter. This is specifically for synthetic oil. This one is an M1 113. And you want to put a bit of clean oil on the top gasket. I put the old filter in the new box. Makes it easier to dispose of. Now, if this filter went straight up, but this one goes sideways, if it goes straight up, I would fill the filter half full of oil. But because this filter goes in on an angle, I don't want to spill it. So you want to hand snug that up pretty good. Wipe it down. Check for leaks after the vehicle's running. But it's still draining right now, so we got a ways to go yet. Now we will service the brakes. So when you're inspecting your tires, you want to make sure that the tread wear is even. That, you know, maybe if one side is starting to round off, then you've got an alignment issue, which could be the cause of a tie rod end. Also, you want to inspect your wheel. Make sure there's no damage to the outside of the rim if it's had curb rash, or the inside. The inside of this rim is fairly clean. I'm still going to wipe it down with brake dust, and then brake cleaner, and then I'm going to mark it, which it came off. So when you rotate your tires, unless if the vehicle has staggered tires, meaning if the back tires are bigger than the front, then you don't rotate. If they're directional tires, then you rotate right rear to right front, left rear to left front. If they are not directional and they're all the same size, then you rotate in a crisscross pattern, meaning left front to right rear, right front to left rear, and so forth. So that's why I always mark the rims, what the pattern is on the rim for the next following season, so that way I remember what the proper pattern is. Also, on a drive tire, you want the most tread on that. So this being a front wheel drive vehicle, you want the most tread on the front of the vehicle, and the wear pattern on all four of these tires is the same, so I'm okay. I just grab one of these paint markers and then mark it on the rim there. That way it's easy to remember in the spring, because my memory sucks. It's just best that I write stuff down. Okay, so we are at the right rear of the vehicle. The sun is in my eye. Terrible. This is a four-wheel disc brake setup. So upon inspecting the brake rotor, everything looks pretty good. There doesn't look like there's a lot of hot spots. It doesn't look like there's a great amount of rust on it. And looking through here, the pads seem to be okay. We will inspect further once we get the caliper off and put some anti-squeal in them, clean up the rotors, and just service the brakes and the caliper sliders. So this is your brake rotor, brake caliper holder, and the brake pads sit inside here. In here, these are brake caliper sliders, and this is your brake line. So this is a rubber line that goes to the steel line, and you just want to inspect everything, make sure there's no cracks, there's no leaks, and if that happens, you need to replace and service those parts accordingly. So let's get started. So the tools that we'll need is a 14 mil socket. I've got a 1-inch extension. I'll use a ratchet to break them loose, and then I will use the air ratchet to take them out. However, I don't like breaking bolts off using the air ratchet. It's hard on the tool. You need the 1-inch extension on the top one here because the emergency cable is in the way. You just want, oh, these have come loose. This vehicle came with service records, so I was able to check for sure that the brakes were serviced before I bought them. But I just wanted to go through this just in case anyway for the winter, because I certainly don't want to be doing this when there's snow outside and I have to pull my Camaro out in the snow. Heaven forbid. Switch it over to the air ratchet now. Make things a little quicker. And always make sure that you give your air tools a couple drops of oil first. Now, if you want to take the caliper holder off, you can. If you actually want to disassemble the rotor, but I don't have to. And look how lovely that just comes off, nice and soft. Yeah, these brakes were serviced on a regular basis, and it shows true. Now, this is an emergency cable for the emergency brakes. And we'll just slide off the rear brake shoes. Kind of want to avoid using a flathead screwdriver because it can chew up the brake pad and damage the rotor. So if you can, try to pull them off by hand. Now the back one will have, this right here is a squeal indicator. So as the brake pads wear down, once the pad reaches where this indicator is, it'll start squealing. So if you hear people's brakes squealing all the time, chances are that that's the cause, and brake pads need to be replaced. And rotors nowadays, not many places resurface them. Most places will replace them. So these pads are in really good shape, but I will take them over to the bench and service them. Also, I like taking these caliper rings off, these retainers here. I like taking these off and cleaning them. And if you're careful, you don't wreck them, because you're going to want to lubricate these after with brake lube. So what I'll do now is I'll just spray these and let them soak for now. And in the meantime, we will clean up the brake rotor. Okay, so I've just skimmed off the edges around here. I know it doesn't look pretty, but there was a little bit of scaling rust, so I just cleaned it up, wire wheeled that. Next, we want to pull these caliper sliders out. These will need to be cleaned and lubricated on the workbench, and they just pull out. Sometimes they can be seize up, like be stuck in there. Just give me a yank, they'll pull out, and try not to tear the rubber boot. Now, while you're here, you want to inspect the caliper. This is the caliper piston. You want to make sure that there's absolutely no brake fluid coming through there, because if it does, you need to get the caliper replaced or rebuilt. In London, there's a brake and steering caliper, or brake and steering rebuilders here in London. A guy named Gord, call there if you live in London and you need your calipers rebuilt. He'll fix them up for you. Them save you definitely a lot of money getting them rebuilt versus replaced. So now that I've cleaned everything off, I'm just going to spray it down with brake cleaner. Let that dry off. Now we will go over to the workbench and we will service the pads. I'll show you how to do that. And I'll show you how to clean up these sliders and re-lube them. Okay, so we got the caliper. This is where the pad sits in here. It slides back and forth in the caliper. So we want to clean this up. As I said, I gave it a little spray earlier there on the workbench. I'll spray these down. I was keeping an old toothbrush in the shop. Should get these cleaned up a bit. Oops. Now we're going to be lubricating these after, and I'll show you once I've got them cleaned what we're going to be doing. We got to do this, all of this, to every brake pad and rotor on the vehicle when servicing the brakes. So hopefully this gives you a glimpse of why you're paying $50 to $100 to get your brakes serviced. I mean, I understand that there's a lot of mechanics that do not go to the extent that I'm going to, but if you own your own vehicle, why not? Why not look after your vehicle this way? So we'll just let that dry for a minute. Now we'll take these off here. Now what you want to do now is wipe these clean, the oil, and then you want to go on the wire wheel here and clean these off. Make sure you got safety glasses on. I also want to clean up the brake pads too, but not the pad. We'll sand them by hand. Now, if you look at the brake pad here, you'll see how that the edges are beveled on both sides. Now, sometimes if you buy aftermarket pads, they're not beveled. You can actually just kind of bevel the edges on your grinder there or sand them down. What that does is it prevents the brakes from squealing. So you want to sand these down just to get any uneven surfaces, any debris that's off. And you can clean them with the brake cleaner after. Sometimes you get a bit of crud in the middle. Just take a small flathead and get that out. And I'll hit it with the air gun after. But also what we're going to do is put some brake squeal on it after. So now that we've got our brake pads sanded, cleaned up, the rings cleaned up, The sliders are cleaned. Also, if these caliper sliders have corrosion and are really rusty and they're shot, go replace them. Go down to your jobber, your dealer, and pick up a new set. These will prevent premature brake wear and will make your brakes work like they should. So now what we're going to do, first thing is we turn the pads over. This is the inboard pad because of the squeal indicator, and this is the outboard brake pad. We will put some disc brake quiet on. This is how I do it. You kind of want to put it on a little bit before so it can get a little bit tacky. This prevents brake squeal. And you put it on where the caliper sits, where it sits in the caliper. This kind of prevents the brake pad from kind of shuffling inside the caliper. Kind of keeps it in place. Now this is synthetic caliper grease or brake quiet. And again, it comes out like this. Apply liberally to the slider. If you're like my friend Lee, too much is just enough. Put the boot back on. Now, you don't want these to lay sideways, and you don't want to drop them on the ground because you can get dirt particles in them, and you want to keep them clean. So we're going to want to keep them upright. Put the boot back in the correct position. And now these things, everything can go back on. So I forgot to mention that I put a little bit of caliper lube on this ring because that's where the pad sits. And this just slides in here, sits on the caliper holder. Just push that down. Just sits down like that. So the pad sits in there and slides back and forth. There's one here on the top as well. Now we want to put the pads back in. So this one, see a fingerprint there. This is the one with the squeal indicator. So this is the inboard or the outboard pad. So you want to make sure that you've got the right side shoe facing in towards the rotor. I've seen people put the back of the brake pad on the rotor before, and then you destroy your rotor. And this should just nicely slide in like so. See? So sometimes you may need to compress the piston in the caliper, and with that being said, you grab a pair of channel locks, or yeah. Open these up. You'll want to compress it down just a hair, just so you can slide it on over the brake pads, like so. Very simple. Now, whoops, I'll have to slide that off. Have to put the caliper sliders in first. This one goes on the bottom. Okay. These, as you can see here, slide back and forth. Now we can put this back on. Oops. You want to push in the sliders so that the pins align with the caliper holder. And now we can put the bolts in, our 14mm bolts. Before I ever use an impact on anything, I like to get 3 to 4 turns on a bolt before I hit it with the air. But this time we're just going to use the ratchet. These are really easy. Actually, you can pretty much finger tight them. Okay, so now we've checked to make sure that they're tight. The rotor is spinning and you don't hear any metal grinding or stones or debris in here. And basically this wheel is ready to go back on. Now after we've done all 4 brakes, we will want to check the brake fluid level and pump up the brakes to build the brake pressure because the calipers have been compressed in the piston. So when you get in, you will feel the brake pedal go to the floor. Make sure you do not drive it until you pump up the brakes. And voila, this brake is serviced and the snow tire is on. Now on to the next 3. We are now, okay, it's been dripping for probably a half an hour since I've been servicing the brakes. So now we're going to put the drain plug back in and put some oil in it in between servicing the brakes. So we let it run until the oil light came off. You'll want to reset your engine oil life, this particular vehicle. You can reset it on the information on the screen. So yeah, the oil level has now dropped down to there and it should be there. So we will add oil accordingly. So I also, this time when I change my oil, I like to check my other fluids and add some washer fluid. I don't understand why they put an electrical component next to a fill in a reservoir. It means it could potentially get wet. And that's full. Okay, so memory serves me right, it's 5.4 liters and it's full now and it's clean. It's brand new oil. Synthetic looks a little darker, so it's not as clean looking as a regular conventional oil, but the synthetic does look a bit darker. And I change my oil on a regular basis based on time. Usually not so much mileage because we don't do a whole lot of driving, but it is very imperative that you maintain your vehicle with regular oil changes to give you the longevity of your engine. And I'm a firm believer in full synthetic, so I use it on all my vehicles, even my lawnmower and my snowblower. Now, since I've already topped up the washer fluid, I'll check my power steering fluid. It has 2 levels on it, cold and hot. Obviously it's cold, and it's right on the exact cold mark. You also want to check your belt, your drive belt, while you're at it. Looks to be in good shape. There's no cracks in it. This vehicle was really well maintained. Also, during an oil change, I checked the air filter. I just actually checked it recently, and I'll pull it out again just to show you. I bought a new one actually, and I didn't need changing, to be honest with you. It's kind of a bear to get out. But yeah, this is still like new. So there's absolutely no point in me replacing it just yet. They say replace your air filter every year or 20,000 kilometers. If you live on country roads and you're doing a lot of driving in dirty, dusty roads, or you live in the desert, chances are you'll probably replace your air filter more often. Some vehicles have a cabin filter. This particular vehicle does not. Also, while you're checking your fluids, you want to check your brake fluid, which I won't do until I've got all the brakes serviced, and I pump up the brakes to check the level, check the coolant, and check your hoses, your belts. Make sure everything is good and clean. Nothing loose, no dirt and debris in here. I just washed this engine last time I washed the car, so everything is pretty clean under here. You want to be careful when you're washing an engine to keep all electrical components covered. Like take a bag, wrap it around the alternator, and then hose it off and take the bag off, obviously. But it's just basic vehicle maintenance. It's wintertime just about. It's the end, mid-November now, and just preparing this vehicle for the winter. We're supposed to get actually some snow on Friday, so that'd be a good idea, and I felt well enough to get this done. Okay, so now got all the brakes serviced. Got all the winter tires on. I've just programmed the tire pressure sensors, which you can check out in another video. So now we're just going to check the tire pressure, put the correct pressure, and then lower the car down. So one of the things I do when I change oil is I keep this in the car. I write down now what I did. Mobile 1 5W30 changed. What's today's date? November the 8th, 17 at 153,570 kilometers, and it's due. So we go 6 months from now, so that's November, December, January, February, March, April 8th. At 163,570. I usually go 6 months or 10,000 kilometers on a full synthetic, but because we barely drive this car, we probably will only do about 5,000 kilometers in the next 6 months, but I still will change it come April. And at April the 8th, chances are I'll be putting the summer tires on and taking these snows off and servicing the brakes again.